Have you ever imagined holding something on fire in your own hands, and yet watching it remain perfectly intact? In a setting where everything burns, everything is lost, and everything seems to be coming to an end, there exists an impossible moment, one that defies logic, reason, and even disbelief. And it is precisely in that instant that the story begins of a soldier who returned from war carrying more than just scars. He came back bearing a spiritual sign he could never explain. Amidst crossfire, deafening explosions, and the stench of destruction, when war reveals its cruelest face, this soldier runs without knowing if he'll see the next second. The ground trembles, the sky seems to collapse, and chaos takes over everything. It is in this very setting, where death becomes a constant presence, that something wholly unexpected occurs. Something that shouldn't have happened. Something so profound that, even today, anyone who hears this story falls silent for a few seconds. Between screams, shrapnel, and flames, he feels an intense heat in his hands, a burning, terrifying heat that makes his heart race. When he looks down, he realizes he's holding a Bible engulfed in flames. The edges are wrapped in fire, the cover darkened, flames dancing before his eyes. Any other object would have been consumed in seconds. But here, something doesn't make sense. The pages don't disintegrate. The words don't vanish. The fire is there, but it doesn't destroy. Have you ever experienced this? Have you ever lived a moment when everything around you seemed to crumble, yet something, or someone, kept you standing? Because that's exactly how many soldiers who return from war describe these spiritual signs, events that appear at the worst possible time, when faith feels distant and hope nearly non-existent. Stories of soldiers returning from war rarely speak only of external battles. They speak of internal wars, sleepless nights, memories that refuse to fade. And yet, amid this landscape of pain, some recount experiences that completely changed their lives. Signs that emerged when there was no strength left. Moments that divided their stories into a before and an after. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might surprise you more than you can imagine. This isn't just a story about faith or religion. It's a story about survival, transformation, and something that defies any rational explanation. A story that connects the battlefield to the human heart, and despair to something greater. While many return from war carrying only the weight of trauma, this soldier came back holding a Bible marked by fire, yet preserved. A symbol that accompanied him day after day, a constant reminder of that impossible instant. A spiritual sign that refused to be forgotten, just like the images still echoing in his mind. And maybe, as you hear this account, you begin to wonder, do signs like this still happen today? Are there moments when something invisible acts just when everything seems lost? Or have you, like this soldier, already stood in the midst of chaos without realizing something was being kept safe for you? Now, take a deep breath, because this story is only just beginning. And what comes next reveals not only what happened on that battlefield, but the profound impact that impossible instant had on a man who returned from war unlike any other. While that image still burns in your mind, the fire, the soldier, the untouched Bible, perhaps something within you is also being awakened. Because stories like this aren't meant just to be heard, they call for a response. They stir memories, sensations, and questions many keep silent. And if this resonates with you, if at any point in your life you felt that something greater protected you when all seemed lost, leave a comment below sharing what moved you most. Your story might be exactly the sign someone else needs to read today. When you comment, you're not speaking alone. You're creating a space where others who've endured internal wars, visible or invisible, realize they aren't alone. Every testimony, every word written below builds a quiet chain of connection, empathy, and strength. And that's what gives meaning to stories like this being told again and again. If this narrative touched you in any way, liking the video is a simple, but powerful way to say this kind of content should reach more people. That's how this message crosses new screens, touches other hearts, and finds those who might need this story right now. And if you feel you want to keep walking through stories like this, of transformed lives, of soldiers returning from war bearing visible marks, and invisible ones, subscribing to the channel is almost like saying, I want to stay here. Your subscription helps this space grow, gain strength, and keep alive stories that must never be forgotten. Here, every gesture matters. Every comment, every like, every new subscription is part of this collective journey. Because what we're sharing isn't just content, it's memory, faith, humanity. And as you reflect on that impossible instant lived by that soldier, the story continues, revealing details that make everything even deeper and impossible to ignore. Now I want to go even deeper into the subject, because to truly understand the weight of that impossible moment, you must see the place where it all happened. War isn't just an external setting of explosions, gunfire, and smoke. It's an environment that corrodes the mind, distorts thinking, and pushes ordinary people into decisions they never imagined they'd make. On the battlefield, the sense of time fades, the future becomes uncertain, and the only visible truth is surviving the next second. It's in this brutal space that faith usually dies, not because people choose to stop believing, but because constant fear creates an inner silence so deep that even prayers seem unable to break through. The sound of explosions is so loud it drowns out any hope. The body stays in maximum alert, the mind never rests, and the heart learns to protect itself by closing off. Many soldiers enter war with clear values, beliefs, and dreams, and return carrying a hidden truth only those who've been there can explain. There's a sense of abandonment that follows every step. Even surrounded by comrades, the soldier feels utterly alone. Every mission could be the last. Every friendly face could vanish in seconds. And slowly, something breaks inside. It's not just the fear of death, it's the continuous impact of seeing life's fragility exposed daily. War teaches, in the cruelest way, that nothing is guaranteed. In this environment, the mind shifts into survival mode. Emotions are suppressed. Feelings are buried. The transformation begins silently, almost imperceptibly. The soldier learns not to feel in order to keep moving. Learns to obey without questioning. Learns to carry images that will never fade. And that's precisely why many return changed, shattered inside, even when their bodies appear whole. There's a hidden side of war rarely shown. It's not in news reports or official speeches. It's the moment the soldier wonders if any of it makes sense. If there's any purpose behind the pain. If there's anything beyond that landscape of destruction. But these questions often go unanswered, because in the midst of chaos, there's no room for reflection. Only action, reaction, and silence. Have you ever imagined holding something on fire in your own hands, turns into a faint inner whisper, perfectly intact? In a setting where many soldiers report they stopped praying not from lack of belief, seems to be coming from exhaustion. There exists emotional, spiritual fatigue, one that defies every word was too heavy to speak, even disbelief. It's at this point, and it is precisely in that merely physical, the story begins of a soldier who returned from war carrying more than just scars. And perhaps that's why stories of soldiers returning from war carry such a powerful crossfire. Because they don't just speak of bullets and tactics. When war reveals its cruelest face, silent the soldier runs without irreversible changes. See the next second. Some come the ground trembles, the sky seems to collapse, lost, and chaos and there are those who return holding something. It is in this very setting logic where death becomes a constant presence, to have no room that something wholly unexpected when you understand this context, something that shouldn't have happened, instant, something so profound another dimension. Even today, it wasn't who just hears the story all silent for a few seconds. It was a place where everything conspired against shrapnel any sign of hope. He feels an intense where the idea of divine protection, a burning, terrifying heat to be that makes his heart race. And yet, when he looks down, he realizes he's holding a Bible engulfed in flames. Signs the edges are wrapped in moments of peace. The cover darkened. They emerge at the height of conflict before his eyes. When the mind is exhausted, any other decisions are made at the breaking point in seconds, and the soul is too weary to pretend it's okay. Something doesn't make sense. It's in those moments that certain revelations disintegrate, not as immediate answers, vanish, but as lifelong. The fire is there. And this soldier, like so many others, have you ever just returned from war with memories? Have you ever lived a moment when everything around you seemed to crumble, yet something, he returned trying to grasp the true impact? Because that's exactly how many soldiers who return from war describe these spiritual signs, rebuild his identity. Events that appear at the worst possible time seemed unable to survive, distant, and hope maybe that's non-existent. When we speak of stories of soldiers returning from war, about rarely speak only of external battles. We're talking about a long journey. They speak of internal wars filled with silences and meanings that only unfold over time. The war may officially amid this landscape but it continues. Some recount experiences that completely change their lives. Certain experiences begin to emerge when there was no strength left. This
moments
makes
that
sense
divided
to me.
their stories into
Now
a
I want to go
before
even deeper,
and an
because
after.
before there was a soldier
Stay with
marked
me
by
until
war,
the end,
there was
because
just
what you're
an
about to
ordinary
discover
man.
might
A
surprise
simple
you
heart,
more than you
a
can
life
imagine.
moving at a
This
predictable
isn't
pace,
just a story
small
about
but
faith
sincere
or
dreams.
religion.
Before
It's a
the
story
uniform,
about survival,
before the
transformation,
battlefield, before
and
extreme
something that
decisions,
defies any
he was
rational
someone like
explanation.
so many others,
A story
just
that
trying to
connects the
find his place
battlefield
in the
to
world.
the human heart.
His
Plans didn't
despair to
involve
something
heroism
greater.
or grand
While
deeds.
many returned
just
from
the
war
desire
carrying
to build
only the
something
weight
stable.
of trauma,
Return
this
home
soldier
at day's
came
end
back holding
and
a Bible
feel life
marked
was
by
on the
fire,
right track.
yet preserved.
Faith was part of
A
his
symbol
story
that accompanied him
quietly,
day after day,
almost
a
silently.
constant reminder
It was
of
something
that
inherited,
impossible instinct,
passed down through
a spiritual
generations,
sign that
more
refused
present
to be
in
forgotten,
childhood memories
just
than
like
in
the
daily
images
choices.
still echoing
The
in
Bible
his mind.
sat there,
And
carefully
maybe,
kept,
as you hear this
not as a
account,
constant
you begin to
object
wonder,
of study,
do
but
signs
as a
like
symbol,
this still happen
an
today?
old gift.
Are there
Perhaps from
moments
his mother
when
or
something
grandmother,
invisible
who always
acts
said
just
some
when
things aren't
everything
explained,
seems lost?
they're respected?
Or have
He
you, like this
respected
soldier,
it, already
kept
stood
it,
in the midst of
but
chaos
didn't
without
live it
realizing
deeply?
something was being
His
kept safe for
mindset
you?
back then
Now,
was practical.
take a deep breath.
The world
because
seemed
this
logical,
story is only
orderly,
just beginning,
predictable,
and what comes
decisions
next
were
reveals
based
not only
on
what
what
happened
felt
on that
safest,
battlefield,
most
but the
rational.
profound impact
The idea
that
of
impossible
spiritual
instinct
signs
had
or
on a
deep
man who
revelations
returned
felt
from war,
distant,
unlike
almost
any other.
abstract.
While that
He
image
believed
still
in
burns
God,
in your mind,
but didn't
the
think
fire,
about it
the
every
soldier,
day.
the untouched
Faith
Bible,
existed,
but
perhaps
occupied
something
a
within you
secondary
is also
space,
being awakened,
important,
because
yet not
stories like
urgent.
this aren't meant
When he
just
decided
to
to go
heard.
to war,
They call
it wasn't
for a
driven
response.
by a spiritual
They stir
mission
memories,
or inner
sensations,
calling. It was
and
a choice
questions
wrapped
many
in
keep
concrete
silent.
reasons. And if this
Duty,
resonates with
opportunity,
you, if at any point
necessity,
in your life you felt that
circumstance,
something greater
there was
protected
fear,
you
of
when all
course,
seemed lost,
but also an
leave a
almost
comment below
naive
sharing what
confidence
moved
that
you most.
everything would be
Your
all right.
story might be
After
exactly
all,
the sign
it always
someone
is,
else needs to
until
read today.
today it isn't.
When you comment,
He left
you're
carrying
not
what he
speaking
thought
alone.
was essential.
You're creating
Some
a space
clothes,
where others who've
keepsakes from
endured
home,
internal
and that
wars,
Bible,
visible
placed
or
there more
invisible,
out of tradition
realize
than
they aren't
conviction.
alone.
Behind
Every
that
testimony,
decision lay
every
a heart
word written
that
below
hadn't yet
builds a
met
quiet
its
chain
own
of
limits.
connection,
A
empathy,
heart
and
never
strength.
tested by
And that's what
extremes.
gives meaning
He
to
couldn't
stories
imagine
like
the
this
impact
being
that
told
environment
again
would
and
have on
again.
his identity,
If this
his
narrative
worldview,
touched you in
or
any
what he
way,
believed to be
liking
true.
the video is a
Before the
simple,
war,
but
pain was
powerful way
distant,
to say this kind
almost
of content
theoretical.
should reach more people.
Before the war,
That's how this
silence
message crosses
didn't
new
scream.
screens. Before the
Touches
war,
other hearts,
nights
and
didn't
finds
carry
those who
heavy
might
memories.
need this story right
This
now.
matters, and if you
Because
feel you want to keep walking through
doesn't
stories like
begin
this
on the
of
battlefield.
transformed lives,
It begins
of soldiers
long before,
returning from war
in who the
bearing
person
visible
is
marks
while still
and
whole.
invisible ones.
Before
Subscribing to the
broken,
channel is almost
before
like saying,
believing they
I
could
want to stay
control
here.
their own destiny.
Your subscription
The
helps the
contrast
space
between
grow,
who he
gain
was
strength,
and who he would
and keep
become
alive
is what
stories
makes
that
this
must
journey
never be
so
forgotten.
powerful.
Here,
It reveals
every
the
gesture
depth of the
matters.
change that was
Every
coming.
comment,
The
every
Bible,
like,
at that
every
time,
new
was
subscription
just
is
a
part of
familiar
this collective
object.
journey. There was
Because
no
what we're
expectation
sharing
of
isn't just
supernatural
content,
protection
it's memory,
or answers.
faith,
It was
humanity,
almost like a thread
and
to
as you
home,
reflect
to
on that
childhood,
impossible
to something
instant
safe,
lived by that
a reminder
soldier,
of who
the
he
story
was before
continues,
everything changed,
revealing details
he never
that make
imagined
everything
that this same
even deeper
object,
and
kept
impossible
without
to ignore.
deep reflection,
Now
would
I want to
become
go
the
even
central
deeper
symbol
into
of
the subject,
everything he'd later
because to
experience.
truly understand
The
the
hidden
weight
truth
of that
is that
impossible
many
moment,
transformations
you must
begin
see
the
this
place
way.
where it all happened.
Simply,
War isn't just an
unintentionally.
external setting
Something
of
small
explosions,
today can
gunfire,
carry enormous
and smoke.
meaning tomorrow.
It's an environment
But in
that
that
corrodes the
moment,
mind,
he had no
distorts
way of
thinking,
knowing,
and pushes
his mind
ordinary
was
people
focused
into
on what lay
decisions
ahead,
they never
the
imagined
immediate
they'd
demands,
make.
the
On the
challenge he
battlefield,
was about to
the
face.
sense of time fades,
Faith wasn't
the future
an
becomes
anchor.
uncertain,
Not
and
yet.
the only visible
This
truth
detail
is surviving
makes
the
all
next
the
second.
difference.
It's in
Because
this
when
brutal
someone
space
who's
that
never
faith
deeply
usually
relies
lies,
on something
not
greater
because
is
people
thrown
choose
into
to
an
stop
extreme
believing,
setting,
but because
the impact
constant
runs
fear
far
creates
deeper.
an inner silence
War
so
doesn't
deep
meet
that
a
even prayers
prepared
seem
heart.
unable to break
It
through.
meets an
The sound of
ordinary
explosions
one,
is
and
so
that's
loud it
precisely why
drowns
the
out
revelations
any hope.
that emerge on
The
this
body
path
stays
carry
in
such
maximum
weight.
alert.
The
They
mind
don't come
never
to confirm
rests,
old
and the heart
certainties.
learns to
They
protect
confront a
itself by
mindset
closing
that
off.
thought it already
Many
understood
soldiers enter
everything.
war with clear
He
values
left as an
beliefs,
ordinary man,
and dreams,
carrying
and returned
inherited
carrying a torment,
hidden truth
nearly
only those who've
invisible
been there
faith.
can explain.
There was no
There's a
awareness
sense
that
of
this
abandonment
choice would
that
lead him into
follows
direct
every
confrontation
step.
with his
Even
limits,
surrounded
his
by
deepest
comrades,
fears,
the
and
soldier
questions
feels
he'd never
utterly
asked
alone.
before.
Every
The journey
mission
had only
could be
just
the
begun,
last,
and the man
every
who left
friendly
home
face
had
could
no
vanish
idea how
in
different
seconds.
he'd be
And
when he
slowly,
finally returned.
something breaks
right
inside.
below. I'm
It's
on
not
this
just the
journey
fear
too.
of death. It's the
Now I want to
continuous
go even
impact
deeper,
of seeing life's
because it's
fragility
impossible
exposed
to understand
daily.
the transformation
War teaches,
that followed
in the
without
cruelest
walking
way,
through the
that
moment
nothing
when
is
everything
guaranteed.
seemed to end. In this
The
environment,
explosion doesn't
the mind
arrive
shifts
with warning.
into survival
There's
mode.
no countdown,
Emotions
no
are
time for
suppressed.
emotional preparation.
Feelings
It
are
arrives
buried.
like a sudden
The
severance of
transformation
reality,
begins
ripping
silently,
away any
almost
sense of
imperceptibly.
control.
1
The
second
soldier
before,
learns not
the soldier
to feel
is moving,
in order to
alert,
keep moving,
following orders,
learns to obey
trusting his
without
training,
questioning.
The next second,
learns to
the
carry
world shatters
images
into
that
sound,
will never
light,
fade,
and impact.
and that's precisely
the
why
ground
many
shakes
return
as if
changed,
it's lost
shattered
its firmness.
inside,
Even
the
when
air
their
grows
bodies
heavy,
appear whole,
hard to breathe.
There's a hidden
The
side
noise
of
is
war
so intense
rarely shown.
it seems to pass
It's
through
not
the body,
in news reports
as if sound
or
itself
official
had
speeches.
Fire
It's the
erupts
moment the
quickly,
soldier wonders
aggressively,
if any of it
without
makes
permission.
sense.
Everything
If there's
around
any purpose
turns to
behind the
chaos.
pain.
If there's
Instinct takes
anything
over,
beyond
the mind
that
shifts
landscape
into
of
automatic
destruction.
mode,
But
trying to
these
keep the body
questions
alive
often go
while the heart
unanswered,
races without
because
rhythm.
in the midst of
In
chaos,
that instant,
there's no
despair
room for reflection.
isn't abstract.
Only
It's
action,
physical,
reaction,
it tightens
and
the
silence,
chest, dries the mouth, slows time in a cruel way. The sense of imminent death isn't a complex thought, it's a silent certainty that settles without words. It's as if the body understands before the mind that there might be no escape. Every step feels too heavy, every breath too short. Have
Fire
you ever
spreads
imagined
fast,
holding something
consuming
on fire
everything
in your
it
own
touches,
hands,
objects,
and yet watching it
structures,
remain perfectly
memories?
intact?
It
In a
makes no
setting where
distinction
everything
between
burns,
what's important
everything is
and
lost,
what isn't,
and everything
war
seems to be coming
doesn't
to an
make
end.
emotional
There
choices.
exists an impossible
It
moment,
consumes,
one that
and
defies
in that
logic,
scene,
reason,
the soldier
and
runs
even
without
disbelief.
knowing exactly
And
where,
it is precisely
guided
in that
only
instant
by the
that the story
impulse to
begins
keep
of a
moving.
soldier who
To
returned
stop
from war
means to
carrying more
vanish.
than just scars.
Then something
He came
catches
back
his
bearing
attention,
a spiritual
not
sign
gently,
he could never
but
explain.
aggressively.
Amidst
A different
crossfire,
kind of
deafening
heat,
explosions,
closer,
and the stench of destruction,
more intense.
when war reveals
Not
its
from the
cruelest face,
surrounding
the
environment,
soldier runs
but
without
from
knowing
his
if
own
he'll see the
hands.
next second.
Amid the noise,
the ground
fear,
trembles,
and
the sky
confusion,
seems to
there's a
collapse,
moment of
and
strangeness,
chaos takes
a
over
detail
everything.
out of place.
It is in this very
Something
setting
that doesn't
where
fit
death
the
becomes a
logic
constant
of total
presence,
destruction.
that something
When
wholly
he looks
unexpected
down,
occurs.
the shock is immediate.
Something that shouldn't
There's
have
fire
happened
in his hands.
Something so profound
Real,
that
living
even
flames
today,
dancing
anyone who hears
dangerously
this
close
story
to his
falls
skin.
silent for a
The
few
natural
seconds.
reaction would be
Between
to drop
screams,
it, throw it
shrapnel,
away,
and flames,
get rid of it.
he
as
feels an
fast as
intense
possible.
heat in his hands.
Anything that
A burning
burns must be
terrifying
abandoned
heat
to survive.
that makes his heart
That's
race.
the basic rule.
When he
in
looks
that
down,
environment,
he
but
realizes he's
something
holding a
makes him
Bible
hesitate.
engulfed in flames.
1 second.
The edges are wrapped
maybe
in fire.
less.
The cover
A tiny
darkened,
interval
flames
that
dancing
later
before
would
his
become
eyes.
eternal in his
Any
memory.
other object
What's
would have
burning
been
in his
consumed
hands
in
isn't
seconds.
just any
But here,
object. Something
it's the Bible
doesn't
he
make
carried
sense.
without much
The
thought.
pages
Placed
don't
there
disintegrate
almost out of habit.
The words
Tradition,
don't vanish.
an old tie to
the
home.
fire is there.
The edges
but
are wrapped
it doesn't
in fire.
destroy.
The cover darkened.
Have you ever
the heat
experienced
is real.
this?
But at the same
Have you
time,
ever lived a moment
something
when
doesn't
everything
add
around
up.
you seemed to
The
crumble,
pages
yet
don't
something
disintegrate.
or someone
They
kept you
don't
standing?
curl. Because
They
that's
don't turn
exactly
to
how
ash
many
like
soldiers who
everything
return
around.
from war describe these spiritual
Desperation
signs
mixes with
events that
confusion.
appear at the
His
worst
mind
possible
tries
time
to make
when
sense of
faith
what
feels
his eyes
distant
are seeing,
and hope
but
nearly
fails.
non-existent.
Logic
Stories
breaks
of soldiers
down.
returning
The
from
hidden
war
truth
rarely
at that
speak
moment
only
begins
of
to reveal
external
itself
battles.
quietly.
They speak
With
of internal
explanation,
wars,
sleepless
without
nights,
speeches,
memories
just
that
a brutal
refuse to
contrast
fade.
between what
And
should
yet,
have happened
amid this
and what is
landscape
happening.
of pain,
Fire
some
that
recount
burns,
experiences
but doesn't
that
consume.
completely changed
The
their
emotional
lives.
impact of that
Signs
second
that emerged
is too
when there
deep
was
to
no
process
strength
there and
left.
then.
There's no
Moments that
time
divided
for
their
reflection,
stories into
prayer,
a
or
before
questions,
and an
the
after.
body is still in
Stay
danger.
with me until the end,
explosion
because what
still
you're about to
echoes.
discover might
War
surprise you
still
more than you
demands
can imagine.
movement.
This
But
isn't
something
just
has
a
been
story
recorded,
about faith
marked,
or religion.
engraved
It's a story
irreversibly.
about survival,
That instant
transformation,
cuts through his
and
mind
something
like
that
a blade
defies
and
any
lodges
rational
itself
explanation.
there.
A
The
story that
decisions
connects the
are
battlefield
made
to the
on
human
autopilot,
heart,
and
he
despair
moves
to something
forward,
greater.
finds shelter,
While many return
survives,
from war carrying
but
only the
he's
weight
no
of trauma,
longer the same.
this soldier came
Something
back holding a
shifted
Bible
in the
marked by
backstage of his
fire,
consciousness,
yet preserved.
even if he can't
A
name
symbol
it yet.
that accompanied him
Fear
day
remains,
after day,
adrenaline
a constant
remains,
reminder
but now
of that
there's a crack in the
impossible
mindset
instant
that believed
a spiritual sign that
predictable
refused
rules.
to be forgotten.
Something
Just like the
escaped
images
war's
still
logic.
echoing in his
Later,
mind.
when his
And
body
maybe,
finally
as you
slows
hear this
and
account,
silence
you
returns
begin to
heavily,
wonder,
that
do
image
signs
comes
like
back,
this still
hands
happen
on
today?
fire.
Are there
The
moments
intact
when
Bible,
something invisible
the impossible
acts just when
contrast,
everything
the
seems
impact
lost?
of that moment
Or have
begins
you,
to expand
like this
inside
soldier,
him,
already
raising
stood in the
questions
midst
with
of
no
chaos
easy
without
answers,
realizing something
not
was being
as a
kept
cinematic
safe for you?
miracle,
Now,
but as a
take
raw,
a deep
direct,
breath,
impossible
because this
to
story
ignore
is only
experience.
just beginning.
This wasn't
And what
just
comes
a
next
scare or a
reveals not
strange
only what happened
coincidence.
on that battlefield,
It was a
but
breaking
the profound
point,
impact
an
that
instant
impossible
when his inner journey
on a
gained
man
a
who
new
returned
layer.
from war
War
unlike
would
any
keep
other.
demanding strength,
While that
resilience,
image still burns
and
in your
obedience,
mind,
But now something else walked with him, the untouched Bible, memory that didn't perhaps burn, something within you is also being awakened, refused to fade. Because stories like this from that moment on, just to be everything begins to carry different response. Because when someone truly faces the feeling that everything could end, and yet witnesses something completely unexpected with you, their perception of reality in your life forever changed. That something greater protected you when all seems lost. This makes sense to me. Leave a comment below. Now I want to go even deeper. Because your story might be exactly the sign someone else needs to read to outside eyes. When you comment, the war continues the same way. Alone. Danger doesn't lessen. You're creating a space where others who've endured internal wars, something starts to shift. Invisible, not explosively, they aren't alone. Not as an immediate conversion or every word written below builds a quiet subtle realignment. Empathy, fear still exists. The body still gives meaning to stories like this, but being no longer occupies all inner space. If this narrative touched you in any way, with something new, the video unexpected, hard to powerful way to say this kind of content should reach more people. Not loud. That's how this message crosses new screens, almost touches other hearts. The mind finds those who might need this story right now, begins to slow. And if you feel you want to keep walking through stories like this, the image of the burning transformed lives intact, of soldiers returning from war bearing visible marks, not as an isolated flash, but as subscribing to the channel is almost like saying of his thoughts, I want to stay here. Every time fear tries to take over, helps that space reappears, gain strength, bringing with it and keep alive stories that must never be forgotten. Despair, here, once absolute, gesture begins to lose its grip. Every comment, it doesn't vanish. Every new subscription is a part of this collective journey. Now there's a crack through which something resembling hope isn't just content. Not naive or romantic hope, humanity, but raw hope. And as you reflect on that impossible instant lived by that soldier, the story continues to chance, revealing that maybe an invisible thread is holding up things that should have been destroyed. Now I want to go even deeper into this transformation, because to truly understand the weight of come with ready-made phrases or clear emotions where it all happens. It shows up in small decisions, just an external setting of explosion, advancing gunfire, in how he observes his surroundings. It's an environment that corrodes the mind, reorganizing without him, and pushes ordinary people into decisions they never imagined they'd still meaning. On the battlefield, everything the sense of time fades. His future becomes closed off to survive, and the only visible truth is surviving the next second. Not to the hostile environment. It's in this brutal space to the possibility that something greater is not because people choose to stop believing. The faith that was once inherited creates an inner silence so deep that even prayers seem not unable to break through, but as confrontation. The sound of explosions, it doesn't bring immediate drowns out any hope. It brings deeper questions. The body stays in maximum alert. Questions, the mind never rests every step, and the heart learns to protect itself of that closing off. Quiet. Many soldiers enter war with clear values. He's no longer reacting purely by instinct, and return carrying a hidden truth only those who've been there can explain. There's a sense of abandonment that follows every step. Even surrounded by comrades, the soldier feels because utterly alone. That hope begins to form. Every mission could not be his certainty of physical protection, every friendly face, but has conviction that life itself holds value beyond that landscape of destruction. Inside. Horror it's continues, not just the fear of death, no longer it's the continuous impact of seeing life's fragility exposed but doesn't daily. Paralyze war the same way, in the cruelest way, the inexplicable that creates an inner opening that didn't exist before. The mind and that opening allows faith to stop being just a distant childhood memory and begin becoming a living experience. Still the transformation fragile, begins silent but real, almost imperceptibly. He doesn't feel invincible. The soldier learns he doesn't feel in order to keep moving. Quite the opposite. To obey the feeling is one of smallness before something immense. Images that that perception doesn't crush, and that's precisely why many return changed. It's as if, shattered in the middle of chaos, even when their bodies something war whole, couldn't take away. There's a hidden side something of war that remains rarely shown, even when everything it's not collapses. In news reports or his official speeches. Intensifies. It's the moment the soldier wonders filled if any of it makes sense, empty of meaning. If there's any purpose, the image of behind consuming fire becomes an anything beyond of that landscape of destruction, not just of the object, but these questions often go unanswered. A silent revelation begins to unfold. There's no survival reflection. Isn't just about keeping the body alive, but preserving something within that horror can't destroy. This change isn't linear. There are days of retreat, moments of doubt, times when fear tries to reclaim full control. But something's been awakened, and it won't return to sleep the same way. Faith now walks beside fear, not in direct opposition, but as counterpoint. Where there was only despair, now there's tension. Where there was emptiness, now there's inner conflict. And that conflict is a sign of life. Decisions start carrying new weight. Gestures become more conscious. The hidden truth of that sign begins working within, reshaping how he sees his own existence. War keeps demanding strength, but now there's also an inner movement to preserve the soul. something that wasn't there before.
And
Have
you
you ever
imagined
imagined holding something that transformation stops being just an isolated event and becomes a continuous, silent, setting where everything burns, one that will reveal layers he can't even imagine to be coming to an end? Comment below. There exists I'm on this journey too, one that defies logic. Now I want to go even deeper, and even because coming back from war, and it is precisely in that plain land that the story begins of a soldier who returned from war carrying more than just scars. On quiet days when the body is bearing a spiritual sign remains on high alert. He returns carrying the weight of deafening explosions, and the stench of destruction easily set when war reveals its visible wounds heal with time. This soldier runs without knowing if he'll see the simplest routines. The ground everyday life into a minefield of memories, and chaos takes over everything. Sleep it is in this very setting, where death becomes unannounced images. That something wholly unexpected occurs, a specific smell that shouldn't have happened. Anything can trigger memories something so profound into chaos. Even today, his body anyone who hears the story falls silent for a few seconds. His heart races between screams, his breath shortens, shrapnel and flames. And the feeling is always an standing on the edge of something unpredictable, terrifying. The war may be officially over, but it keeps when he looks operating down, in the backstage of his mind. Holding a Bible. There's a deep exhaustion that rest can't fix. The edges are wrapped in fire. An emotional weariness that doesn't show up on medical before his eyes, but reveals itself. Any other object would have been consumed in seconds. Among loved ones, in familiar places, make sense. And yet a distance remains. Don't disintegrate. As if part of him stayed behind. The words don't frozen vanish. In that landscape. The fire is there, and extreme but it doesn't destroy. That disconnection breeds guilt, frustration, and a persistent question. Have you ever lived a moment how do I everything around you seemed to crumble? It's in this space of fragility that spiritual questioning gains strength. Because that's exactly how many soldiers who return from war describe these spiritual signs. The image that appear at the Bible returns with sharper clarity now, feels distant far from the roar of non-existence. It doesn't come as a ready returning from war, but rarely speak only of external battles. Why did that happen? They speak of internal wars, now that immediate danger has passed, memories but that the inner battle continues. And yet, his mindset begins changing some recount experiences that completely changed their lives as a reaction to horror. Signs that emerged when there was no strength left as a necessity. Moments that divided their stories into a but to walk through it. And he realizes the tools that helped him survive the battlefield because what you're about to discover might surprise you physical strength, rigid discipline. This isn't emotional just a story about faith all lose or effectiveness when the challenge is internal. It's a story about survival, decisions become slower, and something that more careful. Any rational There's a silent desire to understand what he lived, the battlefield, to find a thread of meaning and despair fragmented memories. While many return from war carrying only the weight of trauma, pressing this soldier came back holding not a Bible marked by fire, but as invitation, yet preserved. An invitation to that accompanied him day after day, beliefs, a constant reminder priorities that once seemed obvious. A spiritual sign of this return refused to be forgotten because it happens just like the seemingly safe territory in his mind. It's here, and maybe away from as you visible danger. You begin to wonder, feels raw. Do signs like this still happen today? To cushion Are there moments when no external orders to follow, just when everything seems lost and in silence? Or have you questions like this echo louder? Already stood in the midst of chaos without realizing what something was being kept when the uniform comes off. Now, take a deep breath is no longer because this story is only just beginning. And what comes a constant presence, not only what happened on that battlefield, but as an anchor. The profound impact he doesn't read impossible instant quick had on a man who returned from war unlike any other. To organize while that image still burns in your mind, of collapse. The fire, every intact the untouched becomes a reminder that something within you is also being awakened. Even because stories like this aren't the journey home just is marked by advances and setbacks. They stir memories, clarity, sensations, days of and questions. Many keep moments silent. When hope feels and close. If this resonates others with you, when darkness if at any point in your life you felt that something greater now protected you when all seemed lost, he no longer leave a comment below sharing what moved you most. Spiritual questioning. Your story might be exactly the sign someone else needs to read today. The backstage of this reconstruction is made of small choices. You're creating a space where others who've endured asking for help when he used to resist or invisible, admitting fragility when they aren't alone. Every testimony, these every word written below builds a quiet chain of connection, impact, empathy, and strength. That something and that's what gives meaning to stories like this. Transformation doesn't erase trauma, but it redefines his relationship with it. Liking the video the faith that once awakened in powerful now seeks space in everyday life, reach more not as an answer to everything, how this message but as companionship through the journey, touches other hearts with pain, and finds those who might need the story right now, with fear of what's still to come. And if you feel you want to keep walking through stories like this, of transformed lives, of soldiers returning from war bearing visible marks and invisible direction. Subscribing to the channel reveals like survival isn't the end of the journey. It's the
Your
beginning of
subscription
another,
helps this
quieter,
space grow,
deeper one,
gain strength,
where battles
and
aren't
keep
visible
alive
but
stories
demand
that
must
even
never be
courage.
forgotten.
And it's
Here,
at this point that the
every
story
gesture
keeps
matters.
unfolding.
Because
Every
what was
comment,
awakened
every
back
like,
then now
every
begins
new
asking for
subscription
real
is part
space
of this
in a life that
collective journey.
continues.
Because
Right
what
below,
we're sharing
I'm
isn't
on
just
this
content,
journey too.
it's memory,
Now
faith,
I want to go
humanity.
even deeper.
And
Because
as
the
you
Bible,
reflect on that
untouched by
impossible
fire,
instant
stopped
lived
being
by that
just a
soldier,
war-surviving
the story
object
continues,
and took a central
revealing
place in his
details
journey.
that make
Not
everything
out of
even
superstition
deeper
or
and
fear,
impossible to
but
ignore.
because it became
Now
a
I
living
want to go
symbol
even
of
deeper into
everything
the
he
subject,
couldn't explain,
because to
yet
truly
couldn't
understand
forget.
the weight of
Since
that
his
impossible
return,
moment,
that Bible
you
has
must see the
accompanied
place
him
where
daily,
it all happened,
almost like a
War
silent
isn't just an
extension of his
external
own
setting
story.
of explosions.
It was always
gunfire,
nearby,
and
smoke.
sometimes on the table.
It's an environment
Sometimes
that
by
corrodes
the
the mind,
other times
distorts
tucked in his
thinking,
bag when
and
he went
pushes
out.
ordinary
There was
people
no
into
fixed
decisions
ritual,
they never imagined
no
they'd
rules.
make.
Just
On the
presence.
battlefield, the sense
Every
of time
time he
fades,
touched it,
the
the
future
memory
becomes
of fire
uncertain,
returned, and the
but
only
now
visible
without
truth
panic.
is surviving
It
the next
returned
second.
full of meaning.
It's in this brutal
The
space
intact
that faith
pages
usually
served as an
dies,
inner mirror,
not because people
reflecting
choose
the
to stop
idea that
believing,
something in him,
but because
too,
constant
had been
fear
preserved,
creates an inner
even after
silence
passing
so
through an
deep that
environment
even prayer
designed
seemed
to destroy
unable to break
everything.
through.
In
The
the
sound of
backstage
explosions is so loud it drowns out
constant
any
reminder
hope.
of
The
survival
body
with
stays
purpose,
in maximum alert.
not just
The
physical
mind
survival,
never rests,
but remaining
and the heart
whole
learns
enough
to
to
protect
continue.
itself by
On
closing
hard
off.
days,
When
many
war
soldiers
memories pressed
enter
war with
he'd
clear
open it
values,
at random
beliefs,
and read a few
dreams,
lines,
and
not
return
seeking
carrying a
definitive
hidden
answers,
truth,
but
only
alignment.
those who've been there can
Like
explain.
someone trying
There's
to
a sense of
reorganize
abandonment
thoughts that
follows
feel out of
every
place.
step. His
Even
mindset
surrounded by
began
comrades,
changing
the
more
soldier
consistently.
feels utterly
Before,
alone.
every mission
revolved
could
around
be the
resisting,
last.
enduring,
Every friendly
holding
face
on.
could vanish
Now,
in seconds.
a different question
And slowly,
emerged. Something
why?
breaks inside.
Why did I come back?
It's not just the
Why
fear of
did
death.
I survive?
It's the
when
continuous
so many
impact
didn't?
of seeing
That
life's
question
fragility
didn't come
exposed
with guilt
daily,
but with
war
responsibility.
teaches, in the cruelest
a silent
way,
sense
that
the
nothing
life
is
given back
guaranteed.
to him needed
In
to
this
mean
environment,
something beyond
the
the mere
mind
continuation.
shifts into survival
Each
mode.
intact page
Emotions
became a
are
milestone
suppressed.
in that transformation.
Feelings are buried.
He'd run his fingers
The
over
transformation
the paper,
begins
noticing
silently,
how nothing
almost
had been erased,
imperceptibly.
how no
The
word
soldier
had been
learns
lost,
not to feel
and that
in
created
order to
a
keep
profound
moving.
impact.
Learns
Because if
to
those
obey
words
without
remained legible
questioning.
after fire,
Learns
maybe
to
his
carry
own story
images
could be
that will
reinterpreted
never
too.
fade.
Maybe
And
the
that's
war's
precisely
marks
why
weren't
many
just
returns
signs of pain,
but
but
starting
starting
points
points
for
for
something
something when
new.
their bodies appear
The preserved
whole.
Bible began
There's a hidden
functioning
side
as an
of
anchor
war
on
rarely
days when his
shown.
mind seemed
It's
to
not
drift
in news
between
reports
past and
or
present.
official speeches.
When decisions
It's
grew
the moment
difficult,
the soldier
when
wonders
emptiness
if
appeared
any of it
unannounced,
makes sense.
it was there.
If there's any
Not
purpose
offering quick
behind the
fixes,
pain,
but reminding
if
him
there's
of an
anything
essential
beyond
truth.
that
He
landscape
didn't go
of
through all
destruction.
that by accident.
But these questions
There's a
often
hidden
go
truth
unanswered
in every survival.
because in the midst
Even
of
if it
chaos,
takes time
there's
to
no
reveal
room for
itself.
reflection.
His journey
Only
began
action,
including
reaction,
moments of
and
intentional
silence, not as escape, but as listening. Bible open, room quiet, thoughts slowly organized. In this process, he realized purpose doesn't arrive as a sudden revelation. It's built daily. Small choices. Small shifts in posture. Small decisions that, together, create a new path. Have you ever imagined holding something on fire in how he related to others, and yet watching
there
it
was more
remain
patience,
perfectly intact,
more listening,
in a
more
setting
care,
where everything
not
burns,
because he'd become
everything
perfect,
is lost,
but because
and
he'd
everything
learned
seems
to value
to come to an
fragility.
end.
There
Life
exists
stopped
an
being
impossible
just
moment,
something to defend,
one that defies
and
logic,
became something
reason,
to honor.
and even disbelief.
The ever-present Bible
and it is precisely
served as a
in that
constant
instant
reminder
that the story
of that
begins of a
mindset
soldier
shift.
who returned from
He didn't
war
talk
carrying
much
more
about
than just
what
scars.
he'd lived.
He came
Not
back bearing a
everyone
spiritual
would
sign
understand.
he could never explain.
But for him,
amidst
that object
crossfire,
carried an
deafening
entire
explosions,
narrative,
and
a
a stench
story
of
of fire
destruction
that didn't
when war
consume,
reveals
of
its
words
cruelest
that
face.
remained.
This
Of a
soldier
man who
runs
returned
without knowing
changed.
if he'll see the
And the
next
more
second.
time passed,
The ground
more he
trembled,
understood
the
that
sky
survival
seems to
wasn't
collapse,
the end of the
and
story.
chaos takes over
It was
everything.
the beginning of
It
a
is in this
quiet
very
responsibility
setting where death becomes
the
a
preserved
constant
Bible
presence
came to represent
that something
an inner
wholly
calm,
unexpected
not
occurs,
necessarily to grand
something
speeches
that shouldn't
or
have
visible
happened,
actions,
something
but to live
so
aligned
profound
with
that
what had been
even
preserved
today,
within him.
anyone who hears
a
this
more
story
conscious
falls silent
life,
for a few
a
seconds.
more intentional
Between
screams,
screams,
shrapnel,
a commitment
and flames
to his
he feels
own
an intense
transformation.
heat in his hands,
And the more he
a
moved
burning,
forward in this
terrifying
process,
heat that
the
makes
more
his
he
heart
realized
race.
that symbol
When he
wasn't
looks
tied
down,
only to the
he
past,
realizes he's
but to the
holding a
future.
Bible engulfed
Something
in flames.
was still being built.
The edges are wrapped
Something
in fire.
was still
The cover
unfolding
darkened.
from that
Flames
impossible
dancing
instant
before
in
his
the middle of
eyes.
fire.
Any other
The story
object would have been
ended
consumed
there.
in seconds.
On the contrary,
but here,
it was just beginning.
beginning to reveal deeper layers. The pages don't disintegrate. This makes sense to me. The words don't vanish. Now I want to go even deeper. The fire is there, because here, but it doesn't destroy. The story stops being just an extraordinary event and starts revealing itself. Have you ever lived a moment when everything around you seemed to crumble, sign, yet which at first seemed like an isolated occurrence in the midst of chaos? Because that's exactly how many soldiers who return from war describe these spiritual signs, not as something mystical events that appear at the worst possible time, when faith feels decisions and hope nearly non-existent. And how he sees his stories of soldiers returning from war rarely doesn't happen only of external battles. It settles slowly, of internal almost wars, imperceptibly, sleepless nights, in the details memories of everyday life to fade. He starts realizing amid this landscape no longer live the way some he recount used to. Experiences certain that completely change no longer their lives. Make sense. Signs that emerged when there was no longer strength who he's become after moments the war that divided their stories Bible into stops being just a symbol of survival and becomes an internal Stay compass, with me until the end, silent because what you're about to discover might surprise you more than you can imagine. There's real this isn't just a story about faith before religion. He merely it's a story about life, survival, transformation. Now, he begins responding to it with any greater awareness. A story that connects doesn't come without the human heart, and there's internal resistance, doubt. While many return from war carrying only the weight of trauma, he wonders if he's exaggerating holding a Bible marked by fire. At others, he fears committing a symbol that accompanies him day after day, doesn't fully a constant understand. Reminder of but that even in those emotional backstage, a spiritual sign pushing him forward to be forgotten, a persistent just like that ignoring it all would waste a rare opportunity for transformation. Maybe, as you hear this reconciliation account, you begin to wonder, doesn't happen. Do signs like this still happen today? To old practices? Are there moments when it's something invisible, raw process, just when everything he doesn't pretend to have all the answers? Like this soldier, he doesn't already stood in the midst of chaos without realizing something was being kept. He acknowledges his own flaws. Take a deep breath. The invisible scars is only just beginning. And it's precisely in that acknowledgement not only what happened on that battlefield, not as an illusory refuge, but as a space for inner reconstruction who returned over time, an unexpected desire while that image to help other soldiers broken from within. The soldier, not as someone who sees himself as superior, perhaps something within you, but as someone who understands pain without because stories like this aren't meant just to be heard. Listen more. They call for a response. He discovers that often the greatest help isn't in advice, many keep but silent. In presence. And if this resonates with by his own example, if at any point in your life you felt that something greater protected you when all seemed lost, leave a comment below sharing what moved you most, or a structured your story plan. Might be exactly born in simple conversations needs to casual encounters. When you comment, carrying the same emotional exhaustion he knew you're creating so well. A space where every story he hears reinforces a hidden visible or invisible. Many survive realize they aren't alone, but remain trapped inside it. Every word written below builds a sense of responsibility beyond any external obligation. And that's what gives meaning to stories once remembered being told again and again. Now transforms into direction. Anyway, he understands he wasn't spared just to keep living, but to live differently. This realization that's how this message crosses new screens, the past, touches other hearts, and finds those who might need the story right now. Suffering, and if isn't romanticized, want to keep walking through stories integrated like this, into the journey transformed part of a larger soldiers returning from war, bearing visible marks, reflecting this and invisible ones. He chooses different environments, almost like different people. I want to stay here. Conversations. Your subscription helps say no to what pulls him back toward old versions alive stories that must never be forgotten. To say yes to paths that every once gesture seemed too difficult. Every choice now carries greater weight new subscription because he understands this collective journey survive without because coherence. What we're sharing isn't just content, life isn't perfect or peaceful humanity. All the time. And as you reflect on that impossible memories that lived by that soldier, days the story feels distant, revealing details that makes everything even deeper and impossible to ignore. A clear sense that now he's no longer just surviving the subject, but walking, because to truly understand the weight of that impossible the impact of that sign, you must see the place where it all touching areas of life isn't just an external setting, and the more he engages with this new reality and smoke, the more he realizes it's an environment that corrodes the mind. There are layers still to be revealed, ordinary people still into decisions they never imagined they'd make. Still to cross his on the battlefield, personal sense of time begins pointing the future becomes even greater, and the only visible truth the individual is surviving the next second. To a collective it's in this brutal space that faith usually dies by step, not because people choose to stop believing, I'm on this journey, but because constant fear creates now an inner silence so deep that even because everything shared so far isn't meant. The sound of explosions is so loud it drowns out any inner mirror. The body
As this
stays
story
in
nears
maximum
its
alert,
own end,
the mind
it begins
never rests,
touching the
and
beginning
the heart
of something
learns to
within
protect
you,
itself
the
by
listener.
closing off.
Because if something
Many
was
soldiers
preserved
enter
in a
war
fire
with
of
clear
war,
values,
the silent
beliefs,
question
and
that
dreams,
arises is
and
inevitable.
return carrying
What
a
has
hidden
been
truth
preserved
only
within
those
you,
who've been there
even
can
amid
explain.
your own battles?
There's a sense of
Maybe
abandonment
you've never
that
stepped
follows
onto a
every
battlefield,
step, never heard
even
real
surrounded by
explosions,
comrades.
never
The
smelled
soldier
gunpowder,
feels utterly
but
alone.
that doesn't mean
Every
you don't
mission
know
could be
chaos.
the last.
There are wars
Every
that
friendly
make no
face
external
could
noise,
vanish in
but
seconds,
destroy from
and
within.
slowly,
Emotional
something
conflicts,
breaks inside.
difficult decisions.
It's not just the
unseen
fear of
losses.
death.
Long
It's the
nights
continuous
when the mind
impact
won't
of
rest.
seeing life's
And
fragility
it's precisely
exposed
in those
daily.
settings that this
War
story
teaches
gains
in the
even
cruelest
deeper
way
meaning. That
What's
nothing
most
is
striking
guaranteed.
isn't just
In
that the
this
Bible
environment,
wasn't consumed
the
by
mind
fire,
shifts
but the
into
context
survival
in
mode.
which it happened.
Emotions
Nothing
are
there
suppressed,
favored,
a different
feelings
outcome.
are buried.
Everything
The
pointed
transformation
to total
begins
destruction.
silently,
And
almost
yet,
imperceptibly.
something remained intact.
The soldier learns not
that
to
hidden
feel
truth
in order
carries
to
an
keep
impact
moving,
beyond the spiritual.
learns to obey
It enters the realm of mindset,
learns to
because
carry
it confronts
images
us with
that
the
will
idea
never
that
fade.
not everything
And that's
passing through
precisely
fire
why many
is
return
destined
to
disappear.
Shattered
How many
inside,
times have
even
you
when
felt
their bodies
tested
up
to
to
your
your
limit?
limit?
There's a
Felt
hidden
everything
side of
around
war
you crumbling
rarely
while
shown.
you tried to
It's
hold
not
onto
in news
meaning in the
reports
chaos.
or official speeches.
This soldier's journey
It's the
isn't
moment
just
the
about
soldier
physical
wonders
survival.
if any of
It's
it
about
makes sense.
internal resilience.
If there's any
about
purpose
what
behind
remains
the pain,
when everything
if there's
superficial
anything
is
beyond
stripped away.
that landscape
And maybe
of
that's
destruction.
where this story
But these
finds you,
questions
without
often go
warning.
unanswered.
There's something
because in the
deeply
midst of
uncomfortable
chaos,
yet
there's no
liberating in
room
this
for
reflection.
reflection. The possibility
Only action,
that, even in the
reaction,
backstage
and
of your
silence.
quietest pains, something is being kept safe. Not by chance, not by luck, but by purpose. That changes everything about how we see our scars. They stop being just marks of suffering, and become signs of continuity. Have
This
you ever
narrative
imagined
doesn't
holding
try to
something on
convince
fire
you of
in your
anything.
own hands? It
And
simply
yet
reveals
watching
a
it
pattern
remain
that
perfectly
repeats
intact
in different forms
in a setting
throughout
where
life.
everything burns,
Moments of
everything
rupture
is lost,
almost
and
always
everything
carry
seems to be coming
revelations.
to an end.
There
Extreme
exists an
situations
impossible moment,
expose what's
one
essential,
that defies logic,
and often
reason,
it's
and
precisely
even
at the
disbelief.
point where we
And it is
believe we've
precisely
lost
in that
everything
instant
that
that
we
the story
realize
begins
something
of a soldier
fundamental
who
is still
returned from
there.
war carrying
Firm,
more than just
even if
scars.
forgotten.
He came
Maybe
back
the
bearing
faith
a
you think
spiritual
you
sign
lost
he
was
could
never
never
explain.
destroyed.
Amidst
Maybe it
crossfire,
was just
deafening
hidden beneath
explosions,
layers of
and the
pain,
stench of destruction,
frustration, when
and
war
exhaustion.
reveals its cruelest
Just
face.
like that Bible
This soldier
covered in
runs
ash,
without
but
knowing if
intact.
he'll see the next
There are
second.
parts of you that
The
resisted
ground
experiences,
trembles,
the
sky
seems
seems to
unbearable,
collapse,
and
chaos
recognizing
takes over
that
everything.
is the first step
It is in this
toward
very
real
setting
transformation.
where death becomes
This
a
story
constant
doesn't
presence,
end with
that
an
something
isolated
wholly
miracle.
unexpected occurs.
It extends into questions
Something
that
that
shouldn't have
echoing.
happened.
What are you
Something
holding in
so
your hands
profound
without
that,
noticing
even
its
today,
value?
anyone who
Which
hears the
parts
story
of your
identity
identity
survive
seconds
situations
between
that nearly
screams,
broke you.
shrapnel, and
What
flames?
decisions
He feels
can
an
you make
intense
from
heat
this
in his
recognition?
hands. A burning,
The impact
terrifying
isn't just
heat
in what
that makes
happens
his heart
here,
race,
but in what it
when he looks
awakens
down,
in you now.
he realizes
Because
he's
in the
holding a
end,
Bible
every
engulfed
great
in
spiritual
flames.
journey
The
begins with
edges
a
are
moment
wrapped in
of
fire,
identification.
the cover darkened,
When we realize
flames
another
dancing before
story
his
touches
eyes.
our own
Any
wound,
other object
when
would
we
have been
understand
consumed
fire
in
didn't
seconds.
just come to destroy,
But here,
but to
something
reveal.
doesn't make
And as
sense.
that understanding
The
deepens,
pages
more
don't
layers of the
disintegrate.
story begin
The
unfolding,
words don't
pointing
vanish.
toward meanings
The fire
even
is
more
there,
intense
but
and
it
personal,
doesn't destroy.
continuing to unfold
Have you
from here.
ever
Comment
experienced
below.
this?
This
Have you
makes
ever
sense
lived
to
a
me.
moment when
If
everything
you've made
around
it
you
this
seemed
far,
to crumble?
it's because
yet this
something
story
or
walked with
someone
you at some
kept you
point
standing
along the way.
Because
And
that's
when that
exactly
happens,
how many
it
soldiers
makes
who return
sense
from
to
war
stay
describe
close.
these spiritual
Subscribe
signs,
to the channel
events
to
that
keep
appear
receiving
at the
content
worst
like
possible
this.
time,
When
made for
faith
those who
feels
go
distant
beyond the
and
surface,
hope nearly
who value
non-existent.
stories that touch,
Stories of
provoke,
soldiers
and
returning
awaken
from war
something within.
rarely speak
Here,
only
every
of
video
external
is
battles.
created with that
They
same
speak of
care,
internal
that
wars,
same intention
sleepless
to give.
nights,
If
memories
this message
that
found
refuse
you
to
at
fade.
the right moment,
and yet,
leave a comment
amid this
saying,
landscape
"This
of pain,
message was
some
for me."
recount experiences
It's a simple
that
way to
completely
show you
changed
stayed
their
present
lives.
until the end,
Signs
and
that
to help
emerged
create
this
when there
quiet
was no
space of
strength
exchange
left
among people who
moments
feel
that
similarly,
divided their
even if
stories
they've never
into
met
a
before.
and if
and
along
after.
this journey you felt this
Stay with
connection
me
forming,
until the end,
hit like
because
on the video you're about to discover might surprise you more than you can imagine. Content alive. This isn't just a story about also need to hear religion like this. It's a story about survival. There's a video right here on the side and something that defies everything we've shared. Explanation. Click and story that connects the battlefield to the story goes on, and the next step might make even more sense. While many return from war carrying only the weight of trauma, this soldier came back holding a Bible marked by fire, yet preserved. A symbol that accompanied him day after day, a constant reminder of that impossible instant. A spiritual sign that refused to be forgotten, just like the images still echoing in his mind. And maybe, as you hear this account, you begin to wonder, do signs like this still happen today? Are there moments when something invisible acts just when everything seems lost? Or have you, like this soldier, already stood in the midst of chaos without realizing something was being kept safe for you? Now, take a deep breath, because this story is only just beginning. And what comes next reveals not only what happened on that battlefield, but the profound impact that impossible instant had on a man who returned from war unlike any other. While that image still burns in your mind, the fire, the soldier, the untouched Bible, perhaps something within you is also being awakened. Because stories like this aren't meant just to be heard, they call for a response. They stir memories, sensations, and questions many keep silent. And if this resonates with you, if at any point in your life you felt that something greater protected you when all seemed lost, leave a comment below sharing what moved you most. Your story might be exactly the sign someone else needs to read today. When you comment, you're not speaking alone. You're creating a space where others who've endured internal wars, visible or invisible, realize they aren't alone. Every testimony, every word written below builds a quiet chain of connection, empathy, and strength. And that's what gives meaning to stories like this being told again and again. If this narrative touched you in any way, liking the video is a simple, but powerful way to say this kind of content should reach more people. That's how this message crosses new screens, touches other hearts, and finds those who might need this story right now. And if you feel you want to keep walking through stories like this, of transformed lives, of soldiers returning from war bearing visible marks, and invisible ones, subscribing to the channel is almost like saying, I want to stay here. Your subscription helps this space grow, gain strength, and keep alive stories that must never be forgotten. Here, every gesture matters. Every comment, every like, every new subscription is part of this collective journey. Because what we're sharing isn't just content, it's memory, faith, humanity. And as you reflect on that impossible instant lived by that soldier, the story continues, revealing details that make everything even deeper and impossible to ignore. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because to truly understand the weight of that impossible moment, you must see the place where it all happened. War isn't just an external setting of explosions, gunfire, and smoke. It's an environment that corrodes the mind, distorts thinking, and pushes ordinary people into decisions they never imagined they'd make. On the battlefield, the sense of time fades, the future becomes uncertain, and the only visible truth is surviving the next second. It's in this brutal space that faith usually dies, not because people choose to stop believing, but because constant fear creates an inner silence so deep that even prayers seem unable to break through. The sound of explosions is so loud it drowns out any hope. The body stays in maximum alert, the mind never rests, and the heart learns to protect itself by closing off. Many soldiers enter war with clear values, beliefs, and dreams, and return carrying a hidden truth only those who've been there can explain. There's a sense of abandonment that follows every step. Even surrounded by comrades, the soldier feels utterly alone. Every mission could be the last. Every friendly face could vanish in seconds. And slowly, something breaks inside. It's not just the fear of death, it's the continuous impact of seeing life's fragility exposed daily. War teaches, in the cruelest way, that nothing is guaranteed. In this environment, the mind shifts into survival mode. Emotions are suppressed. Feelings are buried. The transformation begins silently, almost imperceptibly. The soldier learns not to feel in order to keep moving. Learns to obey without questioning. Learns to carry images that will never fade. And that's precisely why many return changed, shattered inside, even when their bodies appear whole. There's a hidden side of war rarely shown. It's not in news reports or official speeches. It's the moment the soldier wonders if any of it makes sense. If there's any purpose behind the pain. If there's anything beyond that landscape of destruction. But these questions often go unanswered, because in the midst of chaos, there's no room for reflection. Only action, reaction, and silence.